I stopped seeing my girlfriend so that I could lock in my studies, but then I fell asleep in my female roommate's bed, so now my girlfriend is permanently stopping seeing me. My girlfriend Lois, 20 feet, and I, 21 meters, have been dating for about 7 months now, but I had feelings for her for 3 years beforehand. I have also been sharing a flat with 2 other girls and 1 other guy. One of the girls is Katie, and we're pretty good friends. As it just so happens, Lois's ex cheated on her with Katie, but Katie hadn't known they were together at the time. When I first brought Lois over to my place earlier in our relationship, she told me about what had happened. I realized then that things would be messy and I asked Lois if this was a deal breaker for her. She said she wasn't sure, as she was aware that Katie didn't realize she was facilitating cheating. The next day, Lois said she thought it over and held no resentment towards Katie, but felt insecure about herself and uneasy that we lived in the same house. We both agreed to continue the relationship and set our boundaries. One of those boundaries was that Katie and I wouldn't sleep over in each other's rooms anymore. We used to have movie nights on Fridays in Katie's room because it was the only one with a TV in our flat, and I'd sometimes fall asleep there. Everything was platonic and I told Lois about this. Moving to the present, our relationship feels like a fairy tale. Being with Lois is pretty awesome. However, my exams are coming up soon, and because I'm horribly underprepared, I needed to lock in. So I told Lois I would have to be a bit selfish and wouldn't be able to spend much time with her or communicate until they were done. For the past 3 weeks, my life has been, wake up, spend the entire day and night at the library, come home to sleep for 6 hours, then go study again. It's a horrible routine and I feel like a zombie, but I have too much content to catch up on and not enough time. I must also admit that I haven't been in contact with Lois very often. We only talked twice on FaceTime and texted very little. She tried initiating, but I had my phone shut off while studying and only replied when I left the library. On our second call, she said she felt neglected and it was really starting to get to her. She wanted to spend some time together. I apologized, told her I missed her too, and invited her to spend the night. She came about an hour later than expected, and by then I had fallen asleep. She still stayed the night, but the next morning, I felt she was upset that I fell asleep. Then I got really sick 3 days ago. I threw up at the library and asked Katie to come pick me up. My other roommates were out of town, and Lois would have taken too long to get there. When I got into bed, I threw up all over my sheets. At this point, my memory is foggy. I was very drowsy and not thinking straight. Rather than cleaning up and setting new sheets, I texted Lois that I was very sick, had vomited over my bed, and asked if I could sleep over at hers. I got no reply, so I went downstairs and slept on the couch. When I woke up the next morning, I was in Katie's bed, shirtless. I had no clue how I got there. But Lois came to check up on me and walked in on me like this. This was when I woke up, and Lois was very upset. She yelled and left before I had a chance to say anything. Katie told me that when she saw me asleep on the couch, she offered to let me sleep in her bed instead. I have no recollection of this. I probably took my shirt off because I felt hot at some point during the night. She also said she slept on the couch and we didn't share the bed. I've been trying to reach out to Lois, but she blocked my number, WhatsApp, and Gram. We have 2 mutual friends, but they haven't replied to any of my texts. My fever died down last night, so I went to Lois's to clarify the situation, but her roommate said she wasn't going to talk and made me leave. This whole situation feels horrible. I love the relationship I had with Lois, and the fact that it's probably over makes me feel distraught. I also reflected on how I've been recently and realized that a lot of the blame goes on me. My exams aren't a reason to completely shut myself out of my relationship. I need to work on balancing life and studies. Besides her finding me asleep in Katie's bed, she probably had a lot of animosity and upset over the last 3 weeks of me not being in contact. It's painful knowing I made a very unnecessary decision and that more effort on my part could have prevented losing a great person. Update. The expected outcome is what happened. The reason I'm posting this is that I saw Lois for the final time a couple of days ago, and I want to clear the air on some matters. For the sake of tracking time, let's call day 1 the day Lois broke up with me. Day 4 was when my initial made my post. I sat my final exam on day 7, and didn't check the post until day 8. I was very, very shocked reading the comments. To be honest, I wasn't expecting so many people calling me a huge schlong. I knew I made a mistake, but in my head, I thought I was a good person. You know how you just kind of perceive yourself to always try and do things with good intentions, so you think you can't be a bad person? I don't know if that makes sense, but seeing the post opened up my perspective and made me realize the relationship was not salvageable. It also gave me insight into the hurt I caused Lois. I shattered her trust completely and was just not a good boyfriend for an entire month leading to the breakup. So, I just didn't contact her. As I'll mention later, I was not in a good headspace and I distanced myself because I was an even bigger ass than I let on previously. On day 12, she messaged me to ask for her iPad back. She'd let me borrow it for my notes. We last met on day 15 when she came to collect it, among other things. We were both silent the whole time she was there, which must have only been like 5 minutes or so. She returned some of my stuff I'd left in her apartment, and when she was about to leave, I told her I was sorry. She said okay. I said I never meant to hurt her. She, Again, just said okay. I figured nothing I could say was right at this point and we said goodbye. The expected outcome occurred. I can't lie and say I'm instantaneously a better person now. I'm not. I want to be better, but I can't become a better person in a couple of weeks and will need to really work on my character. As for Lois, I can only pray and wish the best for her. I'm going to answer some of the main questions people had. Did Katie know about Lois's boundaries? Yes. I told her the day Lois and I discussed our boundaries. She seemed very understanding and we both kept our distance since. How did you lose consciousness from vomiting? It was from dehydration. On day 1, I went to the hospital at noon because my condition wasn't getting any better. I had a temperature of 104 and a blood test showed I was severely dehydrated, so I was put on a drip. None of this was mentioned because I never expected this to be a matter of criticism and thought very ill sufficed in my previous post. What's the need to be studying so hard? This question needs a lot of context to understand. I'll do my best to provide it now. I'm Indian, and my father is very similar to those strict Indian dads you see portrayed in movies. Take every Indian dad stereotype and you'll get my dad. He's in the military and is as strict as you can imagine. He wanted to force me to join the army. I wanted to choose my own career path in computer science, and we had a huge rift over this. I moved from India to the UK for my studies, and one of the only reasons he agreed to pay for my tuition was because the university I got into is prestigious, so he was happy with that, and also, he had a way to monitor my grades and could use this as leverage to make me study harder. In my first year, I didn't do so well. I finished with a grade average of 63%, which, although the median score, upset my dad a lot. He got extremely physical and smacked me in the face a few times, leaving bruises. He also threatened not to pay for my final year if I didn't get an average of 70% this year, which would mean the entire 2 years I've spent here would go to waste. As an international student, I can't get a loan either. Furthermore, I did really bad on my summatives earlier in the year. I got a 41 on an exam worth 13% of my entire grade, and a 52 and 59 on 2 others worth 6% each. Lois knows everything about my dad. We had a conversation before I went absent in our relationship, where I told her I was very far behind on my studies and was afraid of the consequences. We agreed I should try to study as much as I can until my exams were over, and she said she'd be fine with less contact. Why did you barely stay in contact with Lois? Simply put, I was a bad boyfriend. This is going to sound awful, but I think a part of me didn't want to deal with being in a relationship. I was overwhelmed and it felt like a burden to talk to someone. I completely acknowledge how horrible that is of me. When I had those thoughts, I downplayed them and let myself believe it was just me being cranky. Anyway, there's no excuse to go weeks without talking to your girlfriend and I was an asshole for doing that. However, I never had any intentions of cheating on her. I didn't want to deal with anyone, and so I didn't want to be around Katie either. I mention this because a lot of people speculated that Katie and I had something going on, which isn't the case. I just wanted to be alone until my exams were over. Why did Katie invite you to her bed? I asked her, and she said, I was on my way out to an overnight study session, which meant no one would be home, so I thought you might as well sleep in my bed then. I didn't think it would be a big deal considering how bad your condition was. I thought Lois would understand. I didn't get in the bed when I got home, I slept on the couch. I couldn't sleep in my roommates' beds because they were out of town and locked their rooms. Katie throws parties every once in a while, so they lock their rooms just in case. As for what happens next, I don't think I'll be getting into a new relationship anytime soon. I'm long overdue for some self-reflection and, along with trying to enjoy my summer holidays, I hope I can figure myself out and try to do better from now on.